Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. But so Mike, we're good on Andrew's piece and AI overviews?
Yes, over to Mike. No segue.
Okay.
Over to Mike.
Yes, over to Mike.
All right, so I'm going to go live here. So if you're listening and you want to see this demo of Apple Siri getting local search, you're going to need to go to YouTube to see it. So I have an M3 Macintosh and iPhone 15 Pro, both of which are capable of running both the newest operating systems and Apple Intelligence. Not every device in either line is capable of it. And I realized that Apple Intelligence, having access to a lot of the data in the local data on the phone and elsewhere, has gotten significantly better at local search. Historically, Apple has provided only Google Maps as a really local search tool. Their Spotlight tool is more a federated search. It would show you pictures and emails and maybe a local business. And their Safari search might show you one business. But the new Siri text input, which I just brought up in the upper right of my screen, now has the ability to actually generate a local search. So if I type in a non-geospecific phrase like breakfast, it actually and this is the experience that you get when you bring the text input box up on the phone as well. You get a 3-pack and the ability to open maps, which then takes you to a largely infinite scroll. And you get pretty much the same results for breakfast as you would get for breakfast near me. Pretty much the same, which implies to me that the ranking algorithm is some combination of what it's always been, which is reviews plus proximity. But I found some interesting other capabilities. For example, if I do a search on, if I'm in local and I do a search on divorce, it assumes I want a divorce lawyer. But if I come out and come back in and do a search on divorce, it sees the context a little differently and gives me a informational response as opposed. But if I go in and search for lawyer and then divorce, notice it will then...
It understands context.
It understands some context, which is, for Apple search, a huge breakthrough, right? And so 2 things here. One is it understands 3 things. Understands the data that Apple has in their locally available, the app data, whatever. It provides local search and it understands some amount of context about that local search in a way that we've never really seen with Apple before. Now, this interface currently on the phone isn't as obvious as the Spotlight interface, which is on the home page. But you can get to this, unlike Spotlight, where you have to be on the home page to get to it, or you have to do a swipe. This you can get to from any screen by double tapping the bottom of the iPhone screen. You can bring up this text context box for Siri and do text input and get an answer. Or do microphone input if you prefer.
Do you get the same results when you do the voice input?
I haven't tested extensively. In the first few tests, I got very erratic differences. Sometimes it was the same, sometimes it wasn't. But I didn't really understand that it was looking at context before. Now that I do understand that it's looking at context, I'm going to try the voice and see. But so you have some comments, David? I had another couple thoughts here, but go ahead. Just the thought on where Apple stands in search. Right, we've talked in the past about Apple ultimately losing their $20-some billion from Google. We've talked about the fact that they have one of the world's largest web indexes, which goes largely underutilized. It appears to me that, and then we've also explored Apple and AI. When you look at Apple's CapEx, they're not spending any more this year than they spent last year. When you look at Google's and Amazon's and Facebook's capital expenditures, they are investing massive amounts in AI. Apple seems to be taking a much more slow, measured approach to it. They're building their own server farms with their own boxes at a very low rate. In fact, when I first got this device, I had to sign up to be accepted into the Apple Intelligence. It wasn't automatically available. So they're obviously scaling that very slowly. So the way I look at this, I think Apple is really betting on AI being the future of search, but it being 4 years out, which is how long the legal case is going to take for Google to have to stop.
Well, and that's how long it's going to take for people to upgrade to phones that are capable of accessing Apple Intelligence.
Exactly, and it's how long it's going to take for the ChatGPTs of the world to actually come up with products that are effective in this capacity. And I think Apple is understands that, is slowly building out functionality that could get them there if they choose. But I think also they've made it clear that ChatGPT isn't the only GPT they're going to make available on the phone. They apparently are in negotiations with Google and would make Google's available. And at some point, if the cost of generative AI comes down, Apple will then start bidding out the generative AI features on their phone because they control the distribution and they control the stack. And that's where AI value is really going to take place. And we're starting to see some of that in Apple's apps where they're bringing AI into their apps. It's now in mail and messaging. So I think Apple is playing a different game than everybody else. They're not blowing huge amounts of money, building out massive compute, and they are slowly moving towards a time when they do lose the Google search money. But I believe that they're building an environment where they are bringing what AI they want to the user in a controlled way. And in fact, if you look at their announcement 2 weeks ago of the Business Connect, where they're essentially allowing non-bricks and mortar stores to create a listing, it's basically e-commerce and at-home businesses
and service area businesses.
Yeah. But it's not for showing on maps. It's for increasing Apple's trust in those businesses. So Apple could surface those businesses to potentially either local or informational or shopping queries. So it's sort of, I guess, if I was saying, is Apple going to build a search engine? If they do, it's 4 years out. If they can get a better offer someplace else because they control the distribution, they'll do that. I think they're playing their cards in such a way that they're anticipating it changing in 4 years, and I think they'll be there when that happens.
Couple of quick comments. One sort of point that goes to the cost of serving AI results. Google in its Q3 earnings, which happened this week, announced that they had reduced the cost of serving AI overviews by 90% or something like that. So these costs are going to come down pretty rapidly, I would imagine.
It'll be interesting to see if the energy consumption of them comes down as well.
No, that's probably not. That's what's contributing to your
Apple
76 degree weather in
well, Apple has built their servers around this to be not just neutral,
carbon neutral.
They're more than carbon neutral. They're whatever the next level is, zero carbon, right? They're all
negative carbon.
Negative carbon, right? So it's possible, and I think Apple's playing it in that direction.
So an interesting point about web crawling that I think is what happened with Meta is that these companies are crawling the web to train large language models, and as a byproduct of that, they have a search index. So it's like creating some sort of search engine or quasi search engine is naturally occurring as a byproduct of that crawling. With this, Mike, what you're demonstrating here, I could imagine a lot of people on the iPhone using this to look up to do sort of bottom of the funnel lookups, right? And substituting this for Google, not right at the top, not category searches, because Apple's data is not as good at this point. If I'm looking for a plumber or the best Indian or the house painter, what have you, I'm still going to go to Google because they've got deeper data, they've got better data, more complete. But if I want to know where's a particular business, or is this restaurant near me right now? Um, this would be a perfectly adequate substitute for that.
Some of it depends on how they surface the interface, though. Right now, requires 2 taps at the bottom of the
Yeah,
screen,
that's kind of
which
buried.
intentionally so. They don't. I mean, this is Apple's approach. Like they buried Spotlight, then they surfaced it. And if people figure out where it is, I mean, what's interesting to me is that the data is now there, which it hasn't been in the past. I'll show it to my wife. If my wife double taps at the bottom of the screen, we'll know that Apple is going to get into local search. That's my
Okay. All right.
That's my test.
I think I think Mike, that's the point I was going to make. Is just that I think, to me, that the success or failure of Apple's search as a thing totally depends on how much they push it in everyday interfaces. And
Right.
Greg, I don't think that I would necessarily go to Google because I'm making the calculated decision, or because I'm making the calculation that they have better data or deeper data or whatever. I'm going to Google out of habit, and it's going to take something from Apple like that's in my face to break that habit. Now, to ChatGPT's credit, they have forced people to break that habit because they have a better mousetrap. But I don't see anything here, especially if it's not in my face 24/7, that's going to break my habit of going to Google, which I think is really what all of these generative interfaces kind of have to do.
So I would say, in contrast to what you just said, David, and I agree in principle with what you're saying, is that in my own case, I have substantially broken my Google habit. I still use Google. I use it in specific ways. I don't use it all the time with the same frequency that I did. I'm using ChatGPT far more than Google, but not for local, not for certain kinds of transactional queries. I'm using Perplexity for a lot of things, maybe mid-funnel. I don't know, different things than ChatGPT when I need to find particular links or particular sites. And then I use Google for local search and product queries and certain other kinds of things. So I have migrated away from Google, not just as I've used these other products, which I found to be just as good in or better in certain respects. And I find, like, the AI overview interface and the general Google interface now to be so visually cluttered that it's just sometimes very difficult for me to use. But I may be outside the norm. But if you guys are any more
I
on
have
that,
a
on the
couple
Apple?
more thoughts.
Yeah.
One is, in the DOJ case, it came to light that Google was very concerned every time Apple started stealing queries. Apple is stealing. This is clearly Apple demonstrating that they can steal more queries if they want to. And to David's point, that they surfaced Spotlight in iOS 16 in the the root
On the
level of the
homepage.
phone.
Yeah.
And the success of this as a text input would rely on it replacing the Spotlight interface, which is already there. In other words, be easy enough to replace that and surface it. But also the success of this depends on the success of Siri as a consumer interaction. Apple says they get 1.5 billion Siri queries a day. I would bet that 700,000 of those are repeat questions because they perhaps didn't understand the first one, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt for this conversation. 1.5 billion. So Apple is generating a lot of Siri requests. I have noticed in my car where Siri has a trouble understanding me because of the volume of the background noise has gotten significantly better with this upgrade. So, and we know that Apple's doing a lot of research with noise cancellation and voice enhancement. So if Siri is good, people will learn this through Siri.
Yes.
And if Apple wants to push it, because this is the most effective way forward, they can. But whether they will or not, obviously $20 billion is a very appealing amount of money. So,
well,
but it's going to go away. We know that. It's just going to be 3 or 4 years before it happens.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Apple also has an advertising opportunity here, that would be fairly straightforward. They've had success with their App Store and search advertising there. It would be very easy for them to do an ad put a single ad at the top of those results and make a meaningful amount of money given the volume that they have. And that would be a meaningful revenue stream. And I know that, the investment world wants Apple to make more money, obviously. And, this is a potential area of growth, and that would require them to build more usage, in Siri and this incarnation of it.
So now I think I've said everything I'm going to say.
All right. Okay.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.